What's up, E3 members? Here with Hill Goodspeed. Been on a few times, a lot of great content we're capturing here at the museum, and it's fun to just be able to, again, talk about these stories. Today, we're gonna talk about the Hornet that's sitting behind us, which has a unique flag painted on the side of it. Can you tell me a little bit about this F-18 and why it's special?
Absolutely. Glad that y'all are here. This F-18 Legacy Hornet, as they're called now in the Navy, because the Navy's pretty much switched over to the Super Hornet,
Right.
It has a great deal of history to it. When you walk around the museum, a lot of people will think, gosh, all these airplanes that you have around here, all of them have flown in combat. But it's very rare, actually, among the aircraft in our collection to have ones that actually flew in combat. And this one takes it to the next level because it actually scored a Mig-Kill during Operation Desert Storm. And to show that the Navy uses its aircraft, gives the taxpayers all that they're worth.
Right.
We got word that this aircraft, and also the one that was flying wing on it that also shot down a MiG-21 in Desert Storm, we got word that they were in at the NADEP in Naval Aviation Depot in North Island, California. And they were essentially hulks. The wings were gone, the horizontal tail surfaces were gone, no engine, cockpits were gutted, but in the bare bones, they were the actual Mig-Kill aircraft. And they had served in multiple squadrons after that kill, which was in January '91. And so we managed to acquire them from the Navy. Since we are part of the Navy, we get first right of refusal on things before they go to the boneyard, since we're the official museum for naval aviation. And we arranged to transport them here, and then we had to figure out how to put them back together and really bring them to life. And luckily for us, the Blue Angels, around the same time, were making their own transition from the Legacy Hornet to the Super Hornet. And so the Blue Angel aircraft, when it's an aircraft assigned to the Blues, that's pretty much the end of its service life.
Right.
They're not going to go back to the fleet once they fly with the Blues. So they were getting rid of all their Legacy Hornets. And in addition to loaning some out to other museums, we were able to cannibalize a lot of Legacy Hornet parts and place them on this Mig-Killer. So before it had its nice paint scheme that you see on it right now, it was a patchwork of gray and blue. So we thank the Blue Angels to actually enable us to bring this aircraft back to life. And it was unveiled after some great work by our restoration staff and volunteers. And it's about as complete as you can get a static display aircraft. And what makes it special was it really proved the F-18 Hornet concept, or the strike fighter concept. Because a lot of the Navy's fighters in Vietnam, you had the F-8 and the F-4, which when they first appeared were designed strictly to be air-to-air, either interceptor or a dogfighter in the case of the F-8. But as the Vietnam War progressed, you see them assume more of an air-to-ground role. And so that gave birth to the strike fighter concept in naval aviation. And the F-18 was that aircraft. And even though Desert Storm was not the first time the F-18 went into combat, that was earlier on over Libya in Operation El Dorado Canyon in '86. When they assembled the massive firepower in the Gulf for Operation Desert Storm, you had 6 aircraft carriers, which hadn't been seen since even Vietnam War. And then not to mention all the land-based assets with the Air Force and the Marine Corps. And that was really when the F-18 came of age as far as what it could do. And it was really that first mission that this aircraft was a part of, that first daytime mission. The aircraft was assigned to VFA-81, the Sunliners, operating from USS Saratoga. And it was a daytime mission, and their objective, fully loaded with bombs, was to hit a ground target in Iraq. And the pilot of this one was Lieutenant Commander Mark Fox, who was the OPSO. And then the wingman was Lieutenant Nick Mongillo, who was very much a nugget, as they call it in naval aviation. VFA-81 was his first squadron. He had been a selectively retained graduate. So he had been a flight instructor after he got his wings. So VFA-81, he had a lot of flight hours in the training command, but this was his first frontline squadron. And so he had been in VFA-81 for less than a year. And here he is, finds himself over Iraq, and they get the call that 2 MiG-21s are up and coming at him, and they unleash their missiles and shoot him down, and then they proceed on to bomb their target. and then return successfully to USS Saratoga. So it's really pointed to as the strike that really demonstrated the strike fighter concept and proof positive of what the Hornet could do. And so we're very fortunate to have this aircraft. Admiral Fox, he ended up retiring as Commander 5th Fleet, and he's been here to visit his airplane a couple of times. And that's real special when you get a chance to have a pilot who actually flew that particular aircraft, and just to watch them walk around, and you can see the memories flowing through and coming back to them as they relive that really momentous day in their career. So it's a very special aircraft for us to have. We also have the wingman, Nick Mongillo, so that's also in our restoration hangar, trying to put that one back together as well. So to have both Mig-Killers from Desert Storm on that first day, both Navy Mig-Killers from that first day is pretty incredible.
You said you had a few artifacts from that night that you're willing to share. It'd be great to see those.
Yeah, absolutely. Admiral Fox is gracious enough to look into his own personal files and donate some things to the museum. And one of them was he actually saved the flight schedule for that opening day operations of his squadron, the Sunliners. And yeah, it's pretty interesting to look at because you see the name of Scott Spiker on here, knowing that this was the one and only flight schedule he ever appeared on during Operations Desert Storm. So it's very moving to look at it. And you see Lieutenant Commander Fox, and you see the number 401 aircraft, which was the CO's assigned aircraft, but the one he flew into history that day.
Yeah. It's pretty amazing to see just how much things haven't changed or how similar they are still today, of like how a squadron schedule is written out and done, and then obviously to see Lieutenant Commander Spiker's name on there, and then Tail 401. It's pretty cool to see all that. It's amazing it survived this long.
Yes, tucked away in a file.
Right.
Also, he gave us his helmet bag, which I found interesting, and he pointed out this is the one he carried as a lieutenant commander on that day on board Saratoga, but it's the one, his name tag on it is his ensign name tag. So it is the one he carried around in flight school. So it represents not only his formation as a naval aviator, but when he reached the pinnacle of any fighter pilot's career is shooting down another airplane, and to have this helmet bag go with him through all those stages is an interesting thing too.
I was gonna say, probably because walking around this base from the very beginning, you can see there's a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, and a lot of learning, and a lot of good stories and bad stories that went along with that, for sure.
Absolutely, and one thing he's told me when I've talked to him about it, what it was like to fly in combat and how that relates to training, and he said to me one time, when you fly in combat, there's a misperception. Maybe you're going to become better because you're in that stressful situation. But he says, quite simply, you will perform to the level to which you have trained. And so it is very important to prepare for that moment in everything he did. And certainly he and Nick Mongillo that day and all their squadron mates, they were ready on those first days of Operation Desert Storm.
Yeah, that's incredible. Thanks for sharing these.
Oh, happy to do it.
Yeah, that's cool. How long did the restoration process take?
It took a couple of years. So a lot of the restorations we've done in the past have been aircraft that have been underwater. So that really adds a lot of dimensions to it, to the World War II aircraft like the Dauntless we've talked about earlier. But this one, our crew just turned to on it. And so yeah, it was a couple of years to get the thing back together with a great assist from the Blue Angels, and with their aircraft.
That's incredible. Talking about the strike fighter concept, I think it's good to hammer that point home. And I was joking with someone earlier, but going out with 2 air-to-air missiles, and I believe they had 4 Mark 84 2,000-pound bombs. The thing had to be a pig, but the fact that it went out there, obviously engaged air-to-air, and then continued on to the target and dropped its bombs is a pretty cool thing.
It is, and that really was. I think what it speaks to in the strike fighter concept is a lot of Navy fighters over the years, if you look at history, have evolved into that strike fighter role. Like you can go back to the F-6F Hellcat, which was a pure fighter, known as a fighter, but was a very capable air-to-ground platform. F-4U Corsair is another one. And just when you're dealing with the limited space on a carrier deck, to have those aircraft that can do multi-mission and then that can fit whatever role they're asked to fit, that really adds to the flexibility of the air wing. So that's something that was definitely proven there in Desert Storm.
Can you paint the picture just a little bit more for what it was looking like in late 1990, early 1991 with respect to naval aviation? You mentioned 6 carriers sitting out there off the waters of Iraq and in and around the area. What was that kind of build up, and what was naval aviation's play into Desert Storm?
Well, naval aviation, really the key play was early on with Desert Shield. You had USS Independence that was in theater and was able to get there quickly, and so that was really demonstrated what naval aviation can do. And as forces needed to build up in the Gulf, you had that, as they call it, the 4.5 acres of sovereign U.S. territory right there, with the ability to project power if needed. So that was very vital in Desert Shield. And then you had the months-long build-up to Desert Storm, and really what it showed about naval aviation was it was an era that you see a transition in naval aviation technology. You see some aircraft like the A-7 Corsair II, which was born in Vietnam. It flew its first missions, operational missions, really in combat in Vietnam. So you have that A-7 now on its way out. That was its last combat action, really last significant operational action was Desert Storm. You have the A-6 Intruder, which was doing, was a Vietnam era aircraft that again is toward the end of its career, and then you combine that with the F-18, which was the latest and greatest at the time. So you have that transition in the air wing. You have the transition in the carriers. There was only one nuclear-powered aircraft carrier in the Gulf, was USS Theodore Roosevelt. All the rest were conventional aircraft carriers, including USS Midway, which was commissioned in World War II and had been modified over the years. So you see a transition in naval aviation there. But what you also see is as was the case with the Air Force there, that months-long buildup, they were able to practice what they were going to do if the call came. Practice strikes. They knew exactly what routes they were going to take. They knew what the tanking profiles, all that stuff. They literally flew day in, day out in those months leading up. So when the air war was unleashed, they were ready, and they were it was a sight to behold back in those days. I remember I was in college at the time. You're watching television. You're watching the war, and essentially, and all that new technology that we thought was new back then.
Right.
Laser guided bombs and the like, and it was really a coming out of post Cold War and the modern military aviation packages and technology that had emerged since really and been developed since the end of the Vietnam War.
That's a good point too, because again, that's probably the first time that everyone around the world is watching a war unfold on TV. Now it's just kind of come commonplace between devices that are in your pocket and right into your hand to all the TV screens that are around. So it really has kind of changed how information travels. I do want to jump to their squadron in particular. Had kind of a rough start, more or less, to the war. There was some hiccups. Can you talk about that just a little bit?
Yes, the Sunliners, they lost, the first naval aviator lost during Operation Desert Storm was Lieutenant Commander Scott Spiker. And he was actually not he was not scheduled to go on that first mission, which was a night mission. But he actually went to Mark Fox, who was the OPSO, and said, look, I've been training for this my entire career, and I want to go. And so he actually, Fox got permission from the CO, and they put him on the schedule. And Admiral Fox has told me one of his memories of that, the Sunliners used to wear orange shoelaces because that was their squadron color. And he remembered, one of his memories he has in his mind is of watching Spiker take out his orange shoelaces and put on regular ones. And it's amazing when I heard him say that, what you remember about it that sticks in your mind. But Spiker launched, and from all apparent research afterwards, he was shot down by an Iraqi fighter. He was initially declared killed in action, and then they thought he maybe survived, then he was missing in action, then there was a period of time he was presumed prisoner or captured, and then Eventually, they did find his remains, which were buried near the crash site of his F-18. And when they actually found the wreckage, ironically, Admiral Fox was in a leadership position there, and so he received the news that, hey, the Marines have found the wreckage, and from what he's told me, he said that let's get it. So, and that's one thing we actually have here at the museum. We have some of that wreckage from Scott Spiker, and it's in storage, and so there'll probably be an appropriate time at some point to show it. But the museum here, we have an aircraft on loan. We have many aircraft that we place on loan, and we have an F-18 on loan to Naval Aviation Schools Command, which is where all the flight students start their aviation training, and the F-18 is painted in the markings of Scott Spiker's aircraft. So that's something that the newest generations of aviators can look to and know who he was, know what he represents, and know the sacrifice that those who've come before him have made.
Well, sir, I appreciate you taking the time again to share another story and a little bit more about this aircraft behind us and naval aviation and the tie into Desert Storm. So thank you again.
Honored to do it. Thank you for having me.
Awesome. E3 members, again, hope you enjoyed this. This was another kind of humbling experience. It's great to capture these stories, an exclusive look that we've gotten here the opportunity to do. So we'll catch you next time.